Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Michael Costa Show. Keeping in the spirit of critical theories in general, whether they be critical race theory, gender studies, fat studies, all these critical theories being taught in school. Today I'm going to concentrate on the policies that government and schools want to enact concerning children that are confused and that are questioning their identity. Governments, excuse me, are pushing legislation for children to be able to go on hormones or puberty blockers or have transition surgery without the approval of you, the parents. We all know kids growing up are basically learning about the world. They haven't developed their frontal lobe in their brain yet, so sometimes they're confused and are questioning themselves, questioning their identities. They're learning about life. And in some schools, they can't even give a Tylenol to the kid without asking for the parents' permission. But yet, these, how can I call them? These woke or critical theorists and the naive people that follow them, thinking for virtuous reasons, are encouraging these kids to do this without parental permission. How dangerous is that? I'm going to try to show you today in my video. So let's start off with the base of what these critical theorists want. Coming from the school of Frankfurt is to abolish culture, Western culture. That's what they want. So what is Western culture? It's a meritocracy. It's basically that if you work hard, you'll be able to advance in life. You're not always going to get what you want because life just doesn't work that way. But if you keep working at it and never quit, there is light at the end of the tunnel. That's one of our values. The other values is family. Family is very important for Western culture. Parents, whether they be of the same sex or not, that doesn't matter. No problem with parents being from the same sex. But the fact that they want to ban terms like mom and dad and man and woman, it just proves of what their goal is. This is not in solidarity of the LGBTQ movement or being an ally of this movement. No, this is using them for political reasons. So let me read you this article in the New York Post. New York school encourages kids to stop using words like mom, dad, and inclusive language guide. A Manhattan private school aiming to use more inclusive language is encouraging its students to stop using the terms mom, dad, and parents because the words make assumptions about kids' home lives. Because words make assumptions about kids' home lives. How stupid does that sound? The Grace Church School in NoHo, which offers academic courses for junior kindergarten through 12th grade, issued a 12-page guide to students and staff explaining the school's mission inclusivity. The detailed guide recommends using the terms grown-ups, folks, family, or guardians as alternatives to mom, dad, and parents. It also suggests using caregiver instead of nanny, babysitter. Families are formed and structured in many ways. At Grace School Church, we use inclusive language that reflects this diversity. It's important to refrain from making assumptions about who kids live with, Who cares for them? Whether they sleep in the same place every night, whether they see their parents, etc., the guide reads. The document also states how to use appropriate terms relating to gender, sexual orientation, race, and ethnicity. Instead of asking a person, what are you? Where are you from? The query should be, what is your cultural, ethnic background? Where are your ancestors, your family from? Is your family from, according to Grace's guide? But these people are funny though. Instead of asking a person, where are you, what are you, or where are you from, the query should be, what is the cultural... But who's going to tell me how to talk? That's the whole thing about Jordan Peterson pointing out 4 years ago that these new inclusive laws are just compelled speech. They're trying to change the language, because language is important, and tell us how we should speak. Well, the more you tell me of things not to say, the more I want to say them. The school defended the guide, telling City Journal that its goal is to promote a sense of belonging for all of our students. Grace is an Episcopal school. As part of our Episcopal identity, we recognize the dignity and worth common to humanity, the Reverend Robert Penoyer, assistant head of school, said in a statement to the outlet. So this is them trying to eliminate words mom, dad, and parents from our vocabulary and from the kids' vocabulary, because that's who they're indoctrinating. This is what they're teaching your kids in schools. In the Washington Examiner, now I'm going to go into how the Equality Act, basically, how that hurts, where basically it's permitting anybody who identifies, whether they have gone through a surgery or not, anybody that identifies as a woman can go into women's washrooms and can participate in women's sports in high school, university. It would be against the law to prohibit them. Let's take, for example, your daughter is in gymnastics. She's one of the best in her school at that age in gymnastics or in any other sport. She's working her way onto probably getting a scholarship, full paid scholarship to university based on those talents, those athletic talents. Well, now 5 men who haven't been able to perform in the male competition side of it decide all of a sudden to identify as a female and join your daughter's gymnastic competition or any other sport, thus moving your daughter down to 6th or 7th place in the hierarchy of the best women in that field, and she loses her scholarship. Is that fair? Do you guys find it fair? So in the Washington Examiner, these girls are hurt by transgender competition. Alana Smith's dedication to her sport is profound. Just listening to the elite high school's track star explain her training schedule is exhausting. Yet no matter how hard she trains, if she has to compete against biological males, she stands no chance of winning. There is simply a biological advantage that males have over females, explained the daughter of a Baseball Hall of Fame pitcher, Lee Smith. It's pretty simple and logical and even scientifically based. There is a biological advantage, especially when we come to athletic performance, that advantages males over females. It's bone structure, it's many things. And to deny this is to deny science. So don't come and tell me listen to the science on another matter, but you refuse to listen to the science and a pretty concrete scientific basis that there is biological advantages that males have over females. Here's a perfect example. Excuse me. Smith told me, I have a twin brother who is an athlete but does not run competitively for his sports. We raced against each other recently and he beat me, not because he trained harder, but because there are biological and physical advantage boys have over girls in some sports. Smith, who set high school and county records as a short distance track runner for the moment she stepped on the field as a freshman at Danbury High School in Connecticut, says when she turns up to compete against male runners who identify and compete as females, she knows the cards are stacked against her. And it has nothing to do with not being prepared. It is frustrating. I spend all of that time training to compete against other girls, and I find myself losing to biological males, she said. Since 2017, 2 males who identify as female has taken 15 women's state championship titles in Connecticut. Smith's frustration led her last February to join with 2 other elite Connecticut runners, Selena Soule and Chelsea Mitchell, to file a federal discrimination complaint against Connecticut's policy allowing transgender competition against females. The girls explained that the suit alleges the policy unfairly marginalized them and violated Title IX, the federal law designed to ensure equal opportunities for females in education and school-based athletics. So this is not progressive. This is regressive. Just like the critical race theorists that want to regress back to the Jim Crow era, well, these trans advocates, activists, there's a more affordable term for them, want to bring us back to the time when women didn't have equal rights. They want to violate Title IX, the federal law designed to ensure equal opportunity for males in education and school-based athletics. On Inauguration Day, President Biden issued an executive order saying a court case about transgender rights applies to Title IX, a federal education law that prevents discrimination based on sex. Elite female athletes such as Smith, Mitchell, and Soule say Biden's pro-transgender order underscores their concerns. Mitchell said she was ranked as the fastest girl in the 55-meter dash in Connecticut High School's track in 2019. Then I went to a high school competition competing with 2 biological males who identify as girls, she said. I really put my all into it, but I ultimately came in third behind both of them. Soule said she missed an opportunity to qualify for the New England State Championship in 2019 by one spot. Both spots above me were taken by biological males. Soule said the 2 distinct positions can be held about this that don't need to conflict with each other. This is not about not being supportive of the transgender community, she asserted. Not at all. This is about fairness to girls and women who can effectively hold both points of view. All 3 athletes stressed that their objective is even-handedness in women's sports. Title IX was created for a reason, and that was to give elite female athletes opportunities to be competitive and successful. The very objective was to have fairness in women's sports. It's funny how all we see these stories is about biological males who identify as females competing in women's sports and say that there's no biological differences between women and men. Is the reason they give to why they should be able to compete in women's sports. But yet we never see women that transitioned or that identify as males competing in male sports. I wonder why. Because they would never make it. That's why. Which proves the biological differences and advantages males have. All 3 athletics stressed that their objective... I read that already. Title IX was passed in 1972. In its first 10 years, the number of female athletes had blossomed over 74,000. By 2020, that number had grown to over 220,000 according to data compiled by the NCAA. White House Press Secretary Jens Psaki was one of those elite high school athletes in Connecticut in the mid-1990s who was able to shine because of Title IX as an accomplished swimmer for Greenwich High that included earning all state honors in the backstroke. Psaki went on to swim for 2 years at William and Mary, an NCAA Division I school that currently gives out approximately 200 athletic scholarships a year, including women's swimming. A 2020 study by the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health showed among female and male competitive swimmers, males were increasingly faster than females beginning at the age of 10 years and continuing until the age of 17. In other words, had Psaki, who was also the captain of the high school swim team, had to compete against male swimmers who identified as female, her results may have fallen despite her devotion to competing in her sport. When asked about Biden's executive order and what the White House message is to the girls being forced to compete in sports against biological males, in particular in high school sports that lead to scholarship opportunities, Psaki said the president's belief is that trans rights are human rights and that it is why he signed that executive order. In terms of the determinations by universities and colleges, I would certainly defer to them. So basically, she's just pushing that question aside and refuses to answer it directly. In short, she did not answer the question, despite the president making it a priority to place female and male athletes identifying as female in direct competition. Since Title IX, female athletes have been given the opportunity to compete in sports, giving them the experiences that athletics give to the development of the young mind and body, such as organization and dedication, or learning both how to manage the loss of sitting on the bench or losing and navigating the highs of winning or excelling. It also gives them the opportunity for scholarships, just like the boys. Sol said that the competing in sports is as important for young women as it is for young men and teaches important lifelong lessons. It is one thing to show up at a meet expecting to compete against another girl you know is a worthy rival, she said. It is another to show up and know you will lose before you even start because of the biological advantages you can do nothing about. Christina Holcomb, who is representing the three girls for the Alliance Defending Freedom, a legal foundation, said, "It is because of the advantages of those biological differences that these girls are losing their ability to compete fairly. That is what this is all about." Yes, it's about protecting our daughters. That's what it is. Because if my daughter was in the swim team and she would be one of the best at her age in her school and would have to go compete in provincial or national competitions to get a scholarship in NCAA or any accomplishments, and then now you're taking those accomplishments away from her by letting men compete in that same sport. So if I'm the shittiest player, or let's say I'm a basketball player that plays in Division 1, okay? I don't get drafted. Not strong enough. Don't sign a free contract, a free agent contract. Instead of deciding to go play in Europe, I decide to join the WNBA. Well, technically now, with Biden's executive order, they cannot keep me. It would be against the law to keep me from joining the WNBA. And now you would have a man dominating women in a women's league. All you have to do is identify as a woman. You don't have to go through the transition surgery or take puberty blockers or whatever. All you got to do is identify as a woman, join the WNBA, and be their best player. Anybody with a reasonable brain sees that that's not fair. And about giving puberty blockers and hormones to children, which is dangerous. Here's an article showing you how dangerous it is. Giving teens cross-sex hormones causes premature aging. The Equality Act would make it discriminatory for doctors and clinicians to refuse to prematurely age children who've diagnosed themselves with gender dysphoria and claim a transgender identity. Who have diagnosed themselves. It would be discriminatory for doctors and clinic personnel to refuse to prematurely age children who've diagnosed themselves with gender dysphoria. Come on. Most of us who hit our 40s will find our bodies slowing down, accumulating aches, or suffering new chronic health condition. Even if our health wasn't great before, middle age is full of reminders that one's own peak of youthful bloom is over. Our parents, if they're still with us, have probably started to need more help. They may have come back from doctor's appointments with complicated diagnoses and even more complicated prescriptions. They're a little more tired than they used to be, and they often don't tell us the half of it. To spare our feelings, the inevitable decline of the body is difficult to live with. But yet, with it until we can't. But yet we live with it until we can't. It beats the alternative. Why would anyone want to fast forward this process, starting in their teens? Why would legislators mandate that doctors must issue prescriptions and perform procedures that accelerate aging and the health problems that go with it? We ask because this is what happens when health professionals medicalize childhood gender identity by prescribing puberty blockers to halt pubertal development at its earliest visible signs. Health professionals then prevent this normal and critical development stage altogether by administering cross-sex hormones throughout the sexual maturation window. Excuse me, I need a Kleenex. Sorry about that. Administering cross-sex hormones to teens results in conditions of old age. A girl is sent into menopause or a boy put into andropause decades before their time. Administering cross-sex hormones to teens results in conditions of old age. A girl is sent into menopause or a boy into andropause decades before their time. These are the dangers that these ideologues are pushing onto your children. If the Equality Act becomes law, it will be considered discriminatory for doctors and clinicians to refuse to prematurely age children who've diagnosed themselves with gender dysphoria and claim a transgender identity. So now children are diagnosing themselves with a mental disorder. And doctors and clinicians have zero to say about it. And you tell me this is marginal. Come on. It's dangerous what it is. In many states right now, young people can hear about gender identity at school or on social media. Self-diagnose gender dysphoria as why they're unhappy, say that they're transgender, and from that moment, every school employee and medical professional they meet will simply agree with them. Schools won't let minors take a Tylenol without parent and physician authorization, and often also the school's nurse's supervision. Yet the girl can diagnose herself with a need for teenage menopause and force everyone around her to agree. In some states, she'll be backed up by child protective services, who will consider a parent's opposition to this medical experiment to be a form of abuse or neglect. If your children, okay, let me put it in these terms. If your children, okay, at 10 years old, start seeing other kids at school identifying as another sex, they think it's cool, because many people are doing it. Like I've shown you in the Ash conformity experiment. It happens in adults, so imagine how it's happening in kids, where even though what you see and what you know is wrong, you'll conform to the majority because you don't want to be marginalized. Okay? But yet, if you question or if you decide that you are going to get counseling for your 10-year-old who is having these identity problems, then Child Protective Services might come and take your kid away and call it a form of abuse or neglect. Wake up, folks. It's coming to your house, inside your home. Meanwhile, undergoing menopause before the age of 50 increases the risk of fatal cardiovascular disease for women. The risk is greater before the age of 45, and yet more before 40. Ovaries are important in endocrine organs. The endocrine system, including all the glands that produce and regulate hormones, which are key determinants of overall health and fitness, flooding the ovaries of young females with endocrine disrupting hormones, puberty blockers, and testosterone until they shut down some 30 years before their time, has negative consequences. No kidding. Usually artificial cross-sex hormones are given to override the children's natural estrogen or testosterone in order to bring about the appearance of the opposite sex. These come with their own dangerous side effects. For example, studies suggest that males prescribed oral estrogen to appear feminine have increased risk of venous thromboembolism. I'm going to have a hard time saying that one. Thromboembolism. And females give testosterone to appear masculine have increased risk of high blood pressure and diabetes. Further, female patients taking testosterone have higher rates of unsatisfactory smear tests and are likelier to suffer painful vaginal atrophy. Testosterone can induce urine atrophy and prolapse, painful conditions that often require surgery. Complete hysterectomy is often recommended for female testosterone users to avoid testosterone-caused diseases of the female reproductive tract. Hysterectomy increases the risk of pelvic organ prolapse, not usually seen outside of the serious health conditions or advanced old age. We've also seen individuals who undergo medical transition complain of being diagnosed with brittle bones in their 20s, a condition of old age 30 or 40 years earlier than expected. When puberty is halted, increase of bone mass is stunned before it can reach its adult peak. Then, when followed with cross-sex hormones, bone mass begins declining early due to artificially induced menopause or andropause. So I'm going to post this article if people want to read into it more deeply on my Facebook page. This is basically it. It's going to make giving children these cross-sex hormones is going to age them much quicker than usual. Going to bring them painful chronic issues and many more problems, including maybe sterility, them being sterile. Are you ready for your children to make such decisions at such a young age without your approval? I won't. I don't want to. According to Kate Sozen, who is a blue verified account, who is a reporter, has a blue checkmark verified account, says it's totally okay to have debate and disagree, but folks in media, the term biological males is a serious anti-trans slur. You should not use it without noting that. You see how language is important and how they're trying to ban certain words to further their ideological agenda? So now biological male is the same as using the N-word for African American or black people. Biological male is an anti-trans slur. Come on. And this, coming from a trans activist and writer, he says, and I think this is the most shocking statement I've seen on this issue. He says, or she says, I don't know whether she likes to be called, these days, the narrative is that transgender people will come into bathrooms and abuse little girls. The supposed purity of the victims has remained stagnant. There are no princesses. Little girls are also kinky. Your kids aren't as straight and narrow as you think. Alok Vad Menon, trans activist and writer. This is so important that I have to read again. These days, the narrative is that the transgender people will come into bathrooms and abuse little girls. The supposed purity of the victim has remained stagnant. There are no princesses. Little girls are also kinky. Your kids aren't as straight and narrow as you think. Folks, this is what they're pushing on your children. I don't know if you think this, if you're okay with this. I doubt many parents are okay with this. But for some reason, we're not saying nothing about it. I will be making many more videos on critical theories in general, whether it be critical race theory or gender studies or any of this dangerous school of Frankfurt doctrines and ideologies. Because I think fighting this is important. Because or else, in 15, 20 years, the generation, our young generation now, will be messed up. They're already the most depressed generation in history. Living with anxiety because of what they are teaching them in schools, in elementary, when they're just little kids. Should be learning how to read, write, and mathematics, basic mathematics. But even mathematics now is racist. So guys, that was my video for today. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you soon. Peace out.